on this episode.
Folks do need to learn how to utilize their bodies to heal itself.
The problem is that people are believing in something that never happened.
As it pertains to more homeopathic remedy,
There's something wrong here.
do you think that pharmaceutical companies are intentionally keeping us sick?
It's actually hijacking us as being the product.
It's fascinating that you bring that up.
It's funny that you bring that up.
A sick customer brings money, but also what people don't realize that's happening now.
What is the secret cure for cancer? Welcome to another episode of the Conspiracy Realist, where we journey into the shadows to uncover hidden truths that lie just beneath the surface. Tonight, we delve into one of the most controversial and heart-wrenching topics of our time, the secret cure for cancer and disease. Imagine a world where the cure for cancer exists, but it's kept hidden from the public eye. A world where breakthroughs in medicine are locked away in the vaults of secrecy, known only to a select few. What if, amidst the labyrinth of pharmaceutical interests and governmental regulations, there lies a miraculous remedy capable of eradicating this devastating disease? Why would anyone keep such a life-saving discovery under wraps? Could it be the enormous profits generated by ongoing cancer treatments that keep the veil of secrecy tightly drawn? Or is it a deeper, more insidious plot woven by those who control the strings of power? Tonight, we sip on our cocktails and dive deep into conspiracies, pondering the possibilities. Is there really a secret cure for cancer? Who stands to gain from its concealment? And who pays the ultimate price? Join us as we explore the dark depths, seeking to shed light on this mysterious and provocative topic. Welcome to the Conspiracy Realist. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew, and let's uncover the truth together. My name is Shane Skwarek, here with my esteemed co-host, Mr. Phillips. Today we are joined by James Freed, a truth seeker and expert researcher who's delved deep into the patents and scientific studies to help us discover some of the secrets we have locked away. James, welcome to the Conspiracy Realist.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
So we like to start all these shows by just kind of setting the stage a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, and what you do.
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and that's pretty much where, after that, I got into construction. Well, I was in construction before that because my uncle was a builder in Lexington, Ohio, and I used to go there in the summertime and work all the time. So after the military, I started working construction and then just worked that for years, building, and then got into commercial real estate. And so building homes, building strip malls, even a 13-story building in Anchorage. Being in construction the whole time and living in Alaska, where people want to be free, or they used to be until we called it North Seattle, and then I left. But remained in that, and then started getting into gardening and community gardens and building domes for growing, because you're able to control the climate a lot easier within a dome, and they're more efficient heating, cooling, and creating basically a biosphere. So we got into different avenues of different growing naturally and using natural nutrients and everything else created by nature. And we've come up with different growing apparatuses, and so now we're currently we're getting ready to start a wellness center.
Wow.
And so we're waiting for the humanitarian projects. We have a bunch of humanitarian projects because I have some white papers on different hemp designs that we're going to be utilizing. In other words, to the real green New Deal, not the one that they work for. Their green is stealing money from people. Where we could build make building materials and everything else out of hemp. So we have the ability to do that. But there's what we're trying to do is we're trying to control the whole market right from the beginning. Not that we control it, but as people control it. So then that way it will decentralize because each market would be indicative of being able to create all these products. And so we're
So
waiting
to be
for
clear, you're not against farting cows in this new Green Deal?
no, not against that. But I am vegan though. But
Fair
then and
enough.
that's more of a spiritual aspect as to why. But yeah, so but we have the ability to have renewable sources, real renewable sources. And it's amazing how they gave cannabis, and even though it's monitored, they have more regulations and strict regulations on hemp, which is the difference between. Um, everyone talks about decentralization with crypto. Well, that's what this would be. Is it would be a decentralization, and plus it would end up changing a lot of the economies that we have, and also it's a big threat to the medical facilities because no longer will the chemicals have to be used, and everything, as we'll delve into later, is everything is petro related. Everything is oil related as to all the pharmaceuticals. A lot of people don't know that that's where all the pharmaceuticals come from and synthesized is through oil. And so and how Rockefellers and Rothschilds got together and took over the schools and made them AMA, or American Medical Association, and then the allopathic teachings were brought in other words, to use their oil products and their chemicals as a means of masking diseases instead of curing. So everything that we're using today for even fertilizers to glyphosate to a whole bunch of these other things is all petro related. And so
No, so that's interesting. You hit on a couple points here that I wanted to cover, and I want to kind of bring a couple of them or merge a couple of them together. Hemp and cannabis, just as a broad subject, it's being decriminalized in a lot of states, most states at this point. It's become legal to buy in many states at this point as well. Growing up, I was never a guy that smoked any weed, had no interest in it. Honestly, if I'm being completely transparent, I thought it was disgusting, partially because my experience to it was really from cigarettes. My parents were smokers when they were younger. It would make me cough. It was disgusting. And early on, my father had gotten sick, cold turkeyed it, which forced my mother to stop as well. In any case, it wasn't really until about 2016. I softened my stance. I didn't care. I had plenty of friends that smoked, but it wasn't until about 2016 when my mother was actually going through cancer. And my father had previously already died from cancer and got the crap kicked out of him from all the chemo and all the pain pills. And my mother, I noticed, was starting to refuse to take all of her pain pills and all the stuff prescribed to her. In large part, when I asked her, it was because she'd become a zombie, and she said, if I'm gonna die, I'd rather live every one of my days remembering them than to just be a zombie that's sleeping all the day. Like, what's the point? Just take me now. So at the time in the state of New Jersey, weed is not legal, but you could get a medical marijuana license, and so I did. I said, you know what? We've tried everything else. Let's just try this. And that was probably the most eye-opening experience for me medicinally, because I started giving her weed. And we had like the little pen, I forgot what it was called at the time, maybe Pax, that basically vaporized it. But I also had some friends give me some weed recipes that, they surely didn't use when they were in high school or college, to bake them into butters or brownies or whatnot. And the change in my mother's demeanor and her ability to enjoy her days was dramatic, and it was immediate. It was substantially different than, all the oxys she was being given, all the sleep medication she was being, the anxiety medication, which was literally her staring off into the oblivion. And then you have a doctor telling you, oh, well, she's starting to go. I'm like, no, like, she's not starting to go until she pops all these pills. That's when it raced her. And so that to me became like the biggest tell. Again, it's going to be anecdotal for me and maybe for everybody else, that we're suppressing a drug, for a lack of a better word, that has significantly better benefits than all of these pills are popping. It created in my mind at that point a conspiracy, but I want to turn the floor back over to you since you started talking about this. At what point for you did you start diving into conspiracies? Did that curiosity or intrigue start to settle in? Was it being involved in cannabis?
No, it was. I had to think about it after you asked that question earlier. It was actually when I joined the service, and I had to get vaccines, because when you go through, they give them to you regardless.
Right.
You're just putting a line, and you go through, and it was that old air gun that they'd shoot them all in at one time.
Right. You really have no chance or option, right?
Right. And so I told them I was allergic to tetanus, which I already knew that because I've had to get stitches and had tetanus shot. And so, and I developed a very high fever for that. Well, I went through again and developed a very high fever. It was about 106. And
Wow.
so from there, I was like, there's something wrong here. And so then I started looking into the vaccines. And when Reagan went ahead and gave them immunity. And then I'm thinking, why would you need immunity? Then I started looking at when the vaccines were created and how all these quote diseases or viruses were being eradicated, and it was all by natural source. It was just natural. And the major thing was indoor plumbing, and being able to have the sewer systems and cleaner wells and things like that. That started the whole dive of the whole, all the viruses that were running around. Well, here, getting further into it, I found out that they were vaccinating all the way back in the 1800s.
Interesting.
And that the 1900 swine flu was actually one that was created, and this is what started me off into the whole horizontal gene transfer and the gain of function, which they call it now, is the swine flu epidemic, or the Spanish flu. Well, it all started from the vaccine, but what it was is they put the vaccine in, and then what they did is they put the time bomb within swine. So when people would eat the pork, those were the ones that were getting sick. And then I found out that most of the Muslim countries that don't eat swine, they weren't affected at all. So I was like, there's got to be something here. So then I started getting into the CDC writings and the studies from all the different agencies. And I was always looking for the ones that were not funded by the meat industry or by a whole bunch of other things. I wanted something that was just off by itself, and they were looking for an answer. And I always go more than this, the synopsis of it, which people read, but that's actually a propaganda. Mm-hmm. Because when you get into it, they word it in a way it's not lying, but it's disingenuous. And so when you read through it, you sit there and you start finding things out. And so then that's whenever I realized that I didn't vaccinate any of my kids, all the way back in the 80s. So I would say that was the first one because of my getting sick, joining the tetanus the first time, and then the other time was when I joined the military. And I never received one after that. I would never take another one. And then that's when I started finding out about how all the schools used to teach the herbal remedies. They used to teach about the inflammation. They used to teach about the blood and how the blood becomes sick. They used to teach all this stuff. Their knowledge back then far exceeds what it is today. As a matter of fact, a lot of the information I received and have learned is from the 1800s and early 1900s. So that was the first one.
James, you brought up something interesting, and I know we're going to cover a lot of things today, but if you could just touch on it again. So we were just talking about the Spanish flu, right? You mentioned that the time bomb was in the pork. What did you mean by that?
Well, what they've done is they vaccinated the animals because they knew in the 1800s what's called horizontal gene transfer, that they are able to pollute the people for it. So I see a lot of people out there saying that, oh, I'm a pureblood, I'm a pureblood, I'm a pureblood, but then eat flesh. No, you're not, because all the animals are vaccinated. And being with the domes that I used to travel the country and put these up, I would go to ranches, and the people told me, they said, we really don't like giving our animals vaccines, but in order to have that ranch status, we have to prove that we vaccinated our animals. And there's like
Gotcha.
50 different vaccines that they give the animals.
Wow.
So when you do that, what happens is through blood, everything is transferred through hemoglobins. That's why they
Hmm.
have aborted fetus um, cells and everything in vaccines. That's why they have animal blood in vaccines. That's why they have all the blood components in it, because it cannot make that transfection unless it has the blood component in it. And so they knew this all the way back in the 1800s. There's writings on it. And so, and then what they did is Bayer, Pfizer, and Monsanto all got together, in other words, to create the Spanish flu epidemic. And what what it was is that it was for the first global scale changing of our DNA all the way back then. And what they're doing is, and since then, and the reason why Monsanto was brought in is because they were the ones that brought in the synthetic sugar, in other words, to change the base components of our DNA, in other words, to be able to edit at a later time. And so that's why you had the saccharin, or the synthetic sugars that are being made and then turned into genetically modified sugars, and then also genetically modified corn, sugar, soy, all these other things. Because then what happened is they genetically modified the carbon. So what they did is they changed our base components of our DNA, in other words, for this thing called CRISPR that would be come out later, in other words, to remote edit our DNA without us even knowing it. They could
Gene therapy.
go ahead, sorry.
No, CRISPR is gene therapy for those that aren't familiar. It's very,
Yeah.
very prominent, very popular. Yep.
And so so I've been on this for a long time, and then and how glyphosate was very important to it. And this is another conspiracy that I found out later, early in the early 80s, with a guy named Galen Windsor. I went and seen Galen Windsor speak, and he was the one who was in charge of the Whoops operation in Washington, was the Washington power plant systems, and how they shut it down because of, quote, nuclear um, dangers. Well, he was going around telling everybody that there isn't no fear of nuclear because it's all a lie. He would eat the plutonium. He would go ahead and do all this stuff. He would swim in the pools. He would do everything and show people that it was a lie. And then he even came out and he said, what the problem is that people are believing in something that never happened in the way that it was written in history, and that was Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were carpet bombed with the first generation of glyphosate, or Agent Orange. You take a
Hmm.
look at the injuries and the defects of both places, and then go to Vietnam, and they're exactly the same. So that's why everything died except for the ginkgo tree, and the ginkgo tree was the only thing that would not die because it was impervious to the glyphosate. And that's what they spray on our food. But see, it has a specific function. It does nothing but get in the body, proliferate. This is where a lot of our problems come within a lot of the diseases, because it's the inflammation that's caused through these products. And so then what happens is that it punctures the cells, and then allows for bacteriophages carrying viruses in. And everyone says viruses don't exist, they're dead. Well, they're right to a point, they are dead. But whenever you put it into a component of a live organism, which is the bacteria, and it makes that transfection or the rewriting of the RNA, then therefore it does have it, because it becomes a zombie cell. And so that's when I started. I could go on, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's fascinating, and I think we can kind of tie this all back together because if you remove the word Spanish flu and you look back at what you just described, going through the injections in the pork, vaccinating all the animals, basically poisoning the entirety of society. It's hard not to think back to the year 2020 and see a lot of parallels there, and whatever happened in that particular year. I think it's interesting if the events of 2020 and the whole COVID era taught us anything, I think it's that for a lot of people that the government you enlisted to protect you, they can often mask the truth in favor of lining their pockets with profits. And I think in 2020, I noticed this shift that it feels like it's snowballing today, where every iota of medical advice you're getting by average everyday people. I'm not just talking about tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists or the anti-vax groups of the past, where everyone was always kind of, marginalized down to this whenever you spoke out. It's everybody now. Wellness clinics are popping up every single day. All of these people are starting to question everything. And I think you kind of answered this again, but I want to be clear on this, begs the question for me and effectively brings us to why we're here today. Do you think that pharmaceutical companies are intentionally keeping us sick?
Yes, without a doubt.
Why?
Um, because a sick customer brings money, but also what people don't realize that's happening now. And this is not a conspiracy. I post all about it. And there's other people now that are taking up the mantle, which I'm glad. And I'm glad Sabrina Wallace has come out, because Sabrina has really laid it open, because she's somebody that has opened the doors for me for a lot of things that I was not able to put together. But in all the way back in project or year 2000 or 1998, I've been through 4 year of the dragons. And every year that year, it really hits home with the conspiracy theories. Like this one's a year of the dragon. 2012 was, a Y2K was, 1998 was. So you have all these different times where the year of the dragon comes, and it seems it's a time of an awakening. And at 2000 or 1998, I came across a project called Project Golem. And what it is through the pharmaceutical industries and everything, they're implanting biosensors within our bodies. And and so what they've turned us into is networks. We are the network. We are the power source. We are Amazon servers. We are everything within ourselves. And that's what it is. It's actually hijacking us as being the product.
Through
Sure.
what delivery system, James? Through vaccination?
Through vaccinations, through most of it now is through this is where a lot of people are going to get upset is the graphene oxides. Everyone's talking about graphene oxides, graphene. But there was a reason why they took cannabis away in the late 40s, okay, early 50s.
Quick question, James. For my stupid brain, what is that?
Graphene oxide is what they're saying that is coming to life. It's a synthetic life form that is growing around or in the vaccines. They're the ones that are saying that is having these big, long clots or what have
Okay.
you. Okay, but the graphene oxides are what is building the networks inside of people. That's what is being able to create basically transistors within inside you that is able to remotely be able to send and receive. Everyone's worried about 5G, and I'm telling people they've had 6G since the 90s, and it's inside our host, and we create the electricity that's needed, in other words, to run it. They've already had these nodes or these networks already designed all the way back in the Golem project. I post about that one. But so Sabrina brought it all the way in because she was in charge of all the internet and nodes and everything else like that.
Who is Sabrina? For those that don't know, can you tell us who Sabrina is?
Sabrina Wallace is somebody who worked within the cable installations, phones, and all that stuff, and was in charge of a whole state of Wisconsin. And so what she found out is that there were body area networks that were created, and that the modems that you have are nothing more than just a transformer and being able to actually access our host. Not science fiction. There's people publicizing it all throughout the especially Twitter now.
That's going to be a wild, another rabbit hole to dive down on
Yeah.
the Project Golem side, I think. I want to take us back, though, into disease. Um, from the best of your knowledge, and you can tell me if you can't think of anything offhand, it's no big deal. Are there other instances throughout history where some sort of significant medical discovery was made and it was initially suppressed, either intentionally or overlooked, that subsequently ended up being, the cure, so to speak? Can you think of anything?
Well, yeah, of course. Just like our white papers, everybody wants to see our white papers so they can steal it from us, or they want to come in and invest in our things. But if we're not aligned um, completely, then I'm not giving any information out because I'm
Right.
not going to be pushed out and have another inventions taken and then shelved.
Right.
So, but yes, they've done this all the time. It's been that way the whole time because it all goes back to the pharmaceuticals. And they were making way for the synthetic life form, which is called Synthia, Synthia, which was done by Venter, J. Craig Venter. And if people don't know who that is, they need to look him up. And they need to look up these videos that were done. I posted on my page and been posting everywhere I could, or speaking about this anywhere I could, pertaining to this synthetic life form. And this is why they shelved the things of healing, because, in other words, for this stuff to work, our bodies have to be in a state of, well, I'm looking for the word, inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Because inflammation allows for the transfection, is what it's called. But the transfection can only take place from one hemoglobin to another. So what they do is they pollute one thing with blood and then have us consume that blood. And then next thing you know, our bodies will absorb it because we no longer have the ability to fight it. Our cells are
Right.
weak from being completely punctured because of the glyphosate. So it's been a plan that has gone back a long time ago. And it's been directed for this time. In other words, to literally just make everyone a cyborg. And then in 2013, they've had the Supreme Court case that told them how they could go ahead and have legal patent rights over people. They were denied in 2013, but in the summary of the that was written as to the opinion, it was very clear. They gave them exactly how they would be able to do it. And so since
Hmm.
2013, that's been their whole actions and why they sped the process up, in other words, to do this. Because um, I'll just leave it at that.
So you mentioned inflammation quite a bit, and that's a term that I've been hearing thrown around a lot lately, especially as it pertains to more homeopathic remedies and natural medicine. I think I'm going to go on a little diatribe here for the both of you and for our audience here, just to sort of set the background before I pose my question. In recent years, I've personally begun to pay particular attention to the way the earth is made of balance. You have hot and cold, you have predators and prey, but even the nastiest predators can be taken down by an insect, right? It's balance. Everything seems to always have a cause and effect, a problem, and a solution. The reason I bring this up is because I've started likening it a lot to medicine. And I think we have this arrogance as humans that we can create something out of nothing. And that's not true, because everything that we create on this planet is always going to be derived from what's out there naturally to us. Maybe a new combination or new makeup, but it all already exists. We're not creating anything new. And so that got me thinking about disease and watching an abundance of survival shows. Shout out to my friends at Naked and Afraid. There's always this cure for anything, oftentimes within that same jungle. What I mean by that is this: wherever they plant, I'm using Naked and Afraid as the example. Wherever they plant the survivalists, let's say there's this native snake species out there where if it bites you with this poisonous bite, right? There's a plant in that same jungle that can be used to curb those effects. You get a bee sting. There's a plant there, or there's a tree bark or sap that can help remedy that bee sting. You need to build a very specific shelter to protect you from that particular area's elements. The materials always are there. And I'm not saying they're planted by the show host. I mean, they are like the trees that you need, the leaves that you need to create the specific cannabis. It's always there. So that's what started to really attract me a little bit to natural or herbal medicines. If life, if nature, if earth, if it's all designed in balance, even in the most remote parts of the world, why wouldn't disease be the same? And of course, we can synthesize or attempt to optimize everything. I'm not suggesting we can't, I'm not suggesting everything's in nature. But shouldn't our first fundamental goal be to leverage what already exists out there to restore our bodies to kind of stasis? And so that's what kind of sets up my question to you, James, is am I going completely off the deep end here? Or are we already aware of natural ways to alleviate some of the most common and maybe not so common ailments that are out there?
Yeah, you're right on point. But a lot of our things are by what we eat, which causes the inflammation.
Sure.
Right.
And so by our digestion and everything else like that. But see, if we don't take care of this and change that, then we suffer for it. And we will continue to suffer for it until we find out what is that is causing this inflammation or this problem within our body, or this autoimmunes that they always speak about. Everything is an autoimmune. That just means inflammation. That means,
Sure.
but it affects people differently because it predispositions from what families' weaknesses are within a genetic line. It's not that through epigenetics that you can't change that predisposition. It's just that everybody inherits that predisposition. And if you continue in the same things your parents did, they're going to suffer from the same diseases. And
So how would we today, if everyone that's listening out there, if I wanted to start to decrease the inflammation outside of, it's almost an impossibility, it seems, to cut it out of your diet. It's in our meats, it's in our foods, so on and so forth. And I think for most people, going full vegan and actually harvesting your own vegetables and fruits is also extraordinarily difficult. But the average person that's listening out there, where do you start? What do you do? Is there something you could take? Is there a remedy that you should follow? Is there a routine that you've found? Again, it could be anecdotal, it could be scientific, whatever research you've done or work you've done on it. What can people do to start with that today?
fasting,
Okay. Intermittent or like long-term fasting?
long-term fasting, because it all comes down to macrophage and macrophage and autophages. And what that is your body then destroys all those cells that are no longer working. And what happens is through a certain period of time, after 36 hours, you start producing stem cells. And the stem cells then are basically sent into a form of a T cell back up to your thymus, in other words, to get the programming. But that's why everything is an attack on the thymus, because the thymus is the most important gland in the body. Everyone thinks it's the pineal gland, but it's the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is the third gland in line, and without the thymus, the pineal gland won't work, the pineal gland. Because, see, so what they've done is they've even created this whole religiosity of an Anu age, and I don't call it New Age, I call it Anu age, Anu world order. That's what Bush said. He didn't say the New World Order. See, they change it, but you got to listen to the people speaking it. It's the Anu world order. And so, but so it's the body has the innate ability to heal itself if we are disciplined enough, in other words, to take action and control. And the dry fasting is the best. And they tell everybody, oh, you can't dry fast, you'll die. And that's a lie.
What is dry fasting?
Dry fasting is going 3 days without food and water, food and drink.
Food and water.
Absolutely nothing. Just
Nothing.
air.
Just air. Nothing.
Goodness.
Consume nothing. And except for air, you're right. If you smoke, then you're not fasting because you're polluting the body as you do it. So then what happens is the body then all of a sudden it's a switch. It turns on. so it turns that switch on. And so then when it
How
does,
regularly do you actually do this yourself?
probably quarterly.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah. And um the full moon before the full moon, blood moon, or the eclipse moon that was before April 8th um, uh, eclipse. Um, yeah, there was a few of us that fasted for the full moon, over the full moon period and over the eclipse period.
What's
Uh,
the significance of that?
well, because it seems that our body is in tune with both the sun and moon, and any of these times that things like that happen, it's always the best time, in other words, to do it, because it's a time of releasing. You hear a lot of new age people speaking, oh, you got to let your stuff go at the full moon, you got to do this, you got to do that. But what they're not realizing is just by going out and putting a crystal outside isn't what they're talking about.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
From the ancient, then I started studying the ancient religions, and actually things that have been lost, but recently found or made available. Let's just put it that way. Um,
Sure.
for in other words, for protecting our host, our host, and making it as much as it is. And I had an incurable disease that was called thalassemia. And they said that I would never get rid of it. Well, through fasting and through creating the new stem cells and everything, and a reprogramming of the stem cells, I no longer have it. See, so
Interesting.
so and what thalassemia is, it's a Mediterranean disease that's kind of like sickle cell. And they said that my form, or my the kind that I had, was incurable, and that I'd need a blood transfusion. Well, I'm thinking, well, how do I transfuse my blood? Well, through fasting, because I'm making new stem cells and creating a new everything from our bone system. So it's all there. We just have to learn to utilize it.
Tim, how do you feel about this?
Look, it's there's a lot of science and information that that you're providing, and I know nothing about it, but it's certainly very intriguing. And look, I think I do agree with you, right? I think one of the things that you mentioned was the body has an innate ability to heal itself, and I think that you're absolutely right on point with that. And I think that folks do need to learn how to utilize their bodies to heal itself.
It's funny, and this was not intentional and not planned at all, James. And for our listeners out there, I promise you that this wasn't a softball for this. But I've been getting really big on Twitter, or X, in creating bookmarks, and I'm creating folders in the bookmarks about topics that I'm interested in, partly so we can go back and do episodes on it, but partly so we can deep dive into rabbit holes as well. One of the folders I created was cancer. Uh, Partly again for this talk because I wanted to be able to have some background on it, but we already pretty much had ironed out a lot of the subject matter that we were all going to speak about today. So this was to kind of dive into other remedies down the line. My family has a big history of cancer. I mean, just about everyone in my family has died at 60 at cancer. So it is something near and dear to my heart that I'm storing away so that the next time it comes knocking, we can try these other options. The traditional stuff hasn't worked. In any case, I bring this up because a gentleman by the name of William Mackis, MD, posted an article, and this was on June 1st. So, I mean, today is what, the 3rd, the 4th as we're recording? It's the 4th as we record this. It'll be a couple weeks from now when you all hear this, but in any case, it's very timely. And I'm not going to read all of what's posted here because there's a lot of it, but I am going to read a little bit of it. New article, Fasting and Cancer. New research on a potential revolution in cancer treatment. What's best? Periodic fasting, 3 days, and then it talks about versus ketogenic versus caloric restriction, and it reviews 5 major papers. And the premise of this post is talking about leveraging fasting, as you're saying, James. Fasting 48 hours for meaningful effect, 72 hours to get better outcomes in that 40 hour, and in eliminating cancer cells, protecting your cells from chemo-induced DNA damage. Cancer patients who fasted up to 140 hours had no serious side effects. If you can't handle a fasting mimicking diet regime, which is 300 to 1100 calories a day of broths, soups, juices, nut bars, herbal teas, can give you similar results across a period of 5 days. It goes into a lot of that and a whole lot more depth here. I mean, this is just the tweet out of here as well. There's a bunch of photos and whatnot, and we'll post this up in the video just so you can kind of get an idea of what some of these photos look like. But it's fascinating that you bring that up. The universe sometimes works in some strange ways, and perhaps it's because we've been talking about cancer and potential treatments that I'm starting to see more of this in the feed. That's how the feeds work, obviously. But that particular one caught me completely off guard when I saw it the other day, and I had to save it. And as you've talked about it now, it rung my brain. I went back and looked, and there it is, and it talks about that. I can say again, anecdotally, from my personal experience, I started intermittent fasting a couple years ago. A lot of people start for weight loss. You can lose weight on it pretty quickly. I generally find that you don't lose a whole lot, at least for my own sake. But the thing that I found most promising about intermittent fasting was the level of energy I'd have the next day it's remarkable, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a very difficult to do to start, and I think people pay attention to the time frame a little too much. Whether you're doing 8, 16, or whatever the time breaks down end up be, whatever ones you choose. So I always intermittent fasted. I would do a 16-hour fast, so that little 8-hour window to eat. So I'd stop at 7 p.m. every night and eat lunch at 11. If I ate at 7:05 or 7:10, it's not the end of the world, so forth. I think people got to get that out of their head. But in any case, as I got used to that, my big thing was, we'd play Xbox late at night, and I'd sit down and I'd snack. And then when I started to really put my focus in the intermittent fasting, and I break it from time to time, I noticed that the desire to snack was gone. And I also noticed that when you're tired, you'd get hungry. And what are you doing when you're hungry? Is you're eating more and you're shoving more in to create that energy for you. But once I got on that regimen, and it typically only took me 3 days to feel comfortable, it was so ridiculously easy. Like there would be days I wouldn't eat till 12, 1, 2 o'clock sometimes because I'd be in my loop, and I'm supposed to eat at 11. I would forget because the desire to eat wasn't there. It becomes so routine. I don't know at all if I'd make it for 3 days, especially with no water. That might be a little bold for me, but it is fascinating that what you are saying, there is research done, and it is out there, and it's out there, right? It's not even 1980s research. It's not 1800s research. It is 2024 research that is being done by doctors that are saying fasting. And maybe it's not the only way, but it is a way to help clean the body.
It's funny that you bring that up about the intermittent fasting and your energy level, and similar experience doing something different. For me, when I'm following a ketogenic diet, and I kind of almost naturally intermittent fast, especially when I'm eating healthy. That wasn't really something that I tried to do. I just kind of found like, hey, I'll eat dinner at 6, 7 o'clock, and I won't eat breakfast till 11. So I was kind of doing it anyway. And that wasn't the goal, right? Was to intermittent fast. So I wasn't always following that. And, I am drinking coffee early in the morning. But point is, when I follow a ketogenic diet, and I don't know what the correlation is there, I am just sharp. I am on point. I feel like my brain is just functioning, just firing on all cylinders. And again, I don't know what the correlation or the cause and how we can tie those two together, but I find it interesting that in terms of just following an alternative diet, produces the same results.
I'm in agreement. That's the where I learned this was from Brian and Anna Clement from Socrates, which is down in Florida, and who they get as people to come are stage 4, go home and die people, and the first thing they do to any of the clients that come in at that wellness center is that they are put on a fast, but their fast, they're allowed to drink, and what they drink is wheatgrass. Because wheatgrass has all the stuff of the building blocks that's needed within the body, in other words, to do a quick repair. And so, to put it, they take blood when they come in, and they take blood after 3 days. They're not, you can see the whole difference. And many of these people have reversals immediately. But then they go back home and they do the same thing again and end up falling into the same trap because old habits die hard. And so that's why we're creating our wellness center, because we want to have Brian and other holistic doctors come there and have seminars and everything done there. In other words, to do this and be able to show people that we're able to go ahead and do this and take care of ourselves through minimal amount of elixirs. And that's the whole point, is too many people rely on the elixirs so they can continue doing what they do. And that's the whole point. And as we get well, if we change then what we eat, we are less inclined to have the issues,
Right.
because it's what we eat that becomes the problem within us that creates the inflammations. And or not knowing food combinations, in other words, to make it best. What's best for the body. Like, people will eat nuts but no greens. So then if you eat the nuts with the greens, now all of a sudden all these phenols and everything else that you need in your body are able to be extracted because of the combinations that's needed, in other words, for a healthy diet. I think what it is we've become very ignorant as to what is food, and we've become very
Mm-hmm.
ignorant as to how to combine them, in other words, to make them the healthiest. And so once we do that, and with our fasting, we could create a whole new being within us. As a matter of fact, in a year, you are what you eat today is who you are a year from now. And so that's how fast the body cycles. So if you start to take care of it, it starts to take care of you. Um,
It's fascinating because a lot of the times when you think holistically, or you think natural remedies, you think back to trying to think of that of a sect of people that I can label here. All those crazy people that you'd see on Facebook selling you like eye droplets and a bunch of essential oils, and you have to take like a 75 compound essential oil every single day, and you have to mix all this food, and it's always so complicated. And what I'm getting from what you're saying and from what the research is saying here is it's almost the opposite. Is you don't have to mix 75 ingredients to make this super elixir that's going to cleanse the body. You just have to not eat. And then your cravings, and I again speak from experience, is your cravings do disappear as you clean your diet up. And anybody that diets knows this. You clean it up, the cravings go away, and your tolerance for those foods go away as well. So it's almost the ultimate form of irony that the best thing to eat is not to eat. I would caution, it's more of an inside joke if he's listening out there, just don't go on a full day drinking binge at a WrestleMania if you've come off a 3-day fast. To our buddy Glenn out there, little Glenn Guff shout out for him out there. I want to pivot the conversation a little bit here. One of the last things we really wanted to touch on is really the basis of this. The entirety of this episode is, what is the secret cure for cancer?
Keeping inflammation away. That all the diseases,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be they're trademarks. That's why I don't like to refer to it as cancer, because all it is inflammation. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
all autoimmune diseases are inflammation.
Right.
Sure.
HIV is an inflammation. They're all of them are inflammation. And so, but what has been done is certain chemicals or certain things create a certain type of inflammation to attack a certain part of the body. So by doing this is what happens. That's why cancers are bloodborne, because cancers are because it has to do with the consuming of blood. And so that's another thing that people have. So in other words, to counteract that is you're going to have to do a blood cleanse, and then the only way you blood cleanse is through what? Fasting. Because that's the only way that could be taken care of. Everyone's talking about alkaline, and your body needs the alkaline and acidic. Well, the whole point of the matter is that your blood is the same alkaline and acidic. There's only a 0.01 or 0.1 in the variance. And if you go too high or too low, then your body dies. So it's the rest of the body that becomes the alkaline or acidic, but it all stems from the blood. That's why it's uh, blood uh, blood cell stones. You know, they're, everything stems from the blood, and in our stomach. Our stomach is also critical in the whole thing, because see what happened is our glyphosate and everything else like that that's proliferates within our intestinal system and our stomach keeps us from being able to create the neurons that are needed. In other words, for our mind, and everything is related to the stomach and to the thymus. And if you keep the intestines, so if you keep those three things in good order, then any quote disease that you have will change, because you are no longer of that. Um, you're no longer having any inflammation, and so diet is a very big critical point. But the first thing that needs to be done, and even like Robert O. Young, he's a hematologist, seen probably a million slides of blood. That the whole thing is through the inflammation and everything else in that manner. Um, it shows in the blood. So if we get the blood to work right, then our whole body works right.
I'll tell you, it's jumping into here today. I guess I partly knew what to expect, right? Because a lot of these episodes have been super eye-opening for us, Tim. I wasn't sure that it was going to be as easy as this. And again, we can only really speak anecdotally, and I know I've used that word probably a dozen times today, and I hate using the same words twice, but it's important to underscore that is just the way that I have felt. Tim, you've echoed the same thing, the way you have felt, and just kind of cleaning up your diet and doing that small fast. I've heard nothing but good things on longer fasts. Everybody that comes off it seems to rave about it. I've kind of thought they were lunatics, but I also thought a lot of people were lunatics about a lot of other things that we've seemed to uncover as our eyes get opened and peeled back a little bit here. Tim, coming away from this, what are your thoughts?
I gotta start eating better, man. It's funny, you and I were didn't I just talk about this last night? I'm like, oh man, I have just been eating like an absolute savage, disgusting animal lately. And it's like and I think, James, what you bring up, right, is the biggest piece is something that we know, right, and that's inflammation. And inflammation is generally caused by our diets. And so, what's the best cure for any disease is prevent that disease to begin with. And how do you do that? By your diet, right? And that's something that's not talked about enough in the medical community. There's that old joke of we don't have a healthcare system, we have a sick care system, because that generates profit. I think that's the key, right? And hey, look, right? Everybody's body's different. Some folks can, be health nuts and do the right thing their entire life. And, unfortunately, some of them still get, sicknesses, right? Some of them still, get cancer and die at an early age. And it's mind-boggling. But the overwhelming majority is that when you treat your body right, it's going to treat you right.
That's pretty profound coming out of you, Tim. I'm not going to lie here. Holy cow. James, you had mentioned earlier in our intro that you build dome greenhouses. And I think one of the things that I've taken really seriously as of late, and everybody else, when I was talking about 2020 earlier and how things are snowballing, people are taking personal health into their own hands, you see everybody that's going out there now and they're planting their own gardens, they're trying to grow their own fruits and vegetables, they're trying to figure out how to create their own source of food, which maybe is a testament to the world we live in. But I think what you're doing as a company seems pretty relevant to that. So where can people find you online if they're interested in maybe buying a dome greenhouse or just following you online on social media?
Yeah.
Domegreenhouses.com. You have any social media handles you want to share?
Dome Guy 62 on Twitter. That's just it.
Beautiful. And we'll add those into the description here as
I'm
well.
banned everywhere
Domegreenhouses.com and DomeGuy62 on Twitter.
I'm banned.
That seems to be a recurring theme when people sort of open up the eyes to other people about what is going crazy in the world. We've seen, again, coming out of 2020 and 2021, how many medical professionals, we just saw one again, based on when we're recording this yesterday, we had somebody grilling Anthony Fauci that he worked on COVID patients and he was blacklisted from every social media site, despite the fact that he had, 3 decades of medical experience and was working with patients and saving their lives during the alleged pandemic. So if you're getting banned, James, you're probably doing something right along the way. At least the two of us here think so. So thank you
Well, that
graciously for your time,
to say one more thing and
and to
add
everybody
something
else
to
out there.
it.
Yeah, by all means, go right ahead.
Parasites is very, very prominent within cancer, also, or what they deem to be cancer. So,
So I've read a lot about parasites recently as well. There's, man, I can't think of it off the top of my head. Is there anything that helps mitigate parasites? I know they've talked about ivermectin as a big parasite uh, combatant, but is there anything else specifically to do to kind of maintain that?
yeah, and fenbenzidol is another one
Okay.
because they each take care of different
Hmm.
parasites. And so ridding the body of the parasites gives your body the ability to start healing, but also fasting
Hmm.
does that too because it starves them. But if you actually then do that and take a like a ivermectin or fenbenzidol or anything else like that, and then fast, and then after one day, then make sure you start flushing with a lot of water. You'll have great success.
Hmm.
Because then a lot of the parasites are not getting the foods that we eat. In other words, because most of our cravings are not from us, most of our cravings are from them, and a lot of people don't understand that they literally have the ability to control us and our thoughts.
Hmm.
So a lot of the cravings we have is not ours, because our cravings, after we get rid of them and our taste change, after we start ridding our bodies of things like that.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that after I had to get my gallbladder removed, kind of emergency surgery a couple years ago, and I crash dieted basically right before that, which caused the gallbladder to almost blow. But thereafter, I cut out a lot of foods, and going back to even eating French fries now, for the most part, they taste disgusting to me. I'll still try to sneak a couple here and there, but I don't have I got a nasty aftertaste. I don't have the taste for them, so it's become sort of a natural deterrent. So that's yeah, I think that kind of aligns even what Tim was saying earlier. It's if you treat your body well, it'll treat you well, and it seems like it does start to your point, James, rejecting a lot of the stuff that it just doesn't want to see inside your body. So that's interesting. I appreciate bringing that out.
Well, the bacteria, macrophages, and microbial supports that we have, we're only like, I think it's like, I don't know the exact amount. They squabble about
Hmm.
it, between 6 and 10% of DNA. All the rest is microbes, archaeons, and bacteria. So we're 90% of that. So if we're feeding the faction of of our destruction, then that's what we
Right.
crave. And so they send signals and they talk to each other. But as we change that and start changing and repairing ourselves, in other words, having the bacteria we need, everyone says, "Oh, we need to clean all this bacteria out." Well, that's what happens with
Hmm.
antibiotics. But then people have health issues after antibiotics, because then they have the candida overgrowth, they have everything else. So what it does is it makes it to where you don't have anything within your body to do that. That's why prebiotics is very important. That's why eating foods that are prebiotic then therefore is what is the delivery of the probiotics later, and making sure that you have the right prebiotics, in other words, to remain in the intestines for the correct things to the correct microbiome and everything else. In other words, to feed them as opposed to the other, because the others wants the sugars, they want the starches, they want a whole bunch of stuff. And so when we do that, then we're feeding the wrong uh, the wrong hitchhikers, so to
Right.
say, in our
Right.
body.
Yeah, I've certainly heard that sugar seems to feed all of the beasts in the body, and it's not necessarily a good thing, which, of course, breaks my heart to hear. It's probably my favorite ingredient is sugar, but yeah, it's you gave me a
Yeah.
page of notes here.
Once you get once you get away from it, then it actually becomes a little bit
Right,
abhorrent.
right,
Just the
yeah,
French fry,
yeah. No, you're absolutely
because
right.
it's that it's those things saying, "Hey, we need fed," and then if you don't feed them, then they make you very uncomfortable. They'll give you headaches. They'll give you a whole bunch
That's
of
why you get the
stuff.
Yeah,
keto flu,
So
right? The keto flu when you first start a
yeah,
ketogenic diet. That's what they call it.
yeah, and so that's what happens, and everything wants to survive in this realm. And there's a delicate balance because of all the parasites. And bacteria is a form of a parasite
Sure.
also. So then it's got to have that delicate balance of being able to be fed but not kill the
hmm
host. You know.
Well, listen, we took up an hour of your time again. Cannot appreciate your time. I don't think this is going to be the last time we're going to be chatting together. So hopefully we'll have you back here soon. Follow James on Twitter, and please do check out his website. To our audience out there, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this riveting episode of the Conspiracy Realist, I do invite you to like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us on social media, if it's X, Instagram, Facebook, or subscribe on Spotify. Wherever you listen to your podcast, please do that favor for us. It helps us go a long way. Tonight, we've navigated through whispers and the shadows, daring to question the status quo. Imagine a clandestine world where breakthrough lies hidden and their brilliance obscured by the veils of power and profit. But let us not forget those who paid the ultimate price, the countless souls battling cancer with their hope flickering like distant stars. For them, this isn't a mere theory, it's a desperate plea for salvation. And so as we part ways tonight, remember this. The truth often hides in plain sight, camouflaged by half-truths and misdirection. So, fellow truth seekers, keep your eyes wide open, your skepticism sharper than Occam's razor, and together we'll pierce the veil, one revelation at a time. We'll see you next time.